Perfect.
Okay, for record's sake,
Okay.
what's your ethnicity?
My ethnicity is I'm Korean American.
Okay, and your parents are both from Korea?
They are both from Korea.
Wait, did you say that one of your parents was from North Korea?
No. One of
Okay. Was it a grandparent?
yeah. I mean,
Okay.
it wasn't North Korea. Like that's
Oh.
the thing. It was one Korea.
Oh, okay.
And then
When did that happen?
so that would be the Korean War.
Okay, I don't.
Oh, you're fine. No worries.
Yeah. Wait, okay, so the Korean War happened when?
Um I think it was in like the I don't know, let me see here. In 1953. 1950 to
Okay.
1953.
Okay.
Hmm.
So they were from what is now North Korea.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
And then you grew up in a Korean community.
I did, yeah, in Maryland. Maryland is a pretty diverse place, but because my parents didn't speak English, they needed a community around them. And in Maryland, there's a strong community of Korean people. So we lived kind of, I guess, like in the vicinity of a lot of Korean people in markets and stores. And yeah, it was like a self sustaining community. We had like everything: doctors, dentists, people that would help you like they would tutor me, like all types of stuff.
So basically, you wouldn't have to speak English if you didn't want to.
Yeah, I guess I didn't have to speak English if I didn't have to. Yeah, absolutely. So when I would have to would be like when I was at school.
Okay. And was your school in the in the community, or did you go outside of the community to go to school?
I went to school in the community. It was a public school, so I mean, I grew up in a really multicultural space, and so there was people from all over. Um, yeah, and so we just went to school.
So how has it been since you grew up in one of those to be in Missoula? What is has it been really shifting in terms of your own identity?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it it makes me just think about who I am and where I came from, and then kind of shifting to where I am now and who I am now. And so I definitely feel like I do go through a lot of thought and reflection when it comes to how my identity's changed in this space here in Missoula, because my sense of community is, like in Maryland, or I guess you wouldn't know, but in Maryland, for me, um, community can be, it doesn't always have to be like, well, I guess it would be like a tangible thing, right? Like I would just land, or I would get home and I'd immediately see people. Maybe I wouldn't know them, but I know that I could relate to them just based on the way that
Yeah.
they look, or I hear them speaking Korean, or I know their kid, or their kid knows me, or and so like it's just like just an immediate connection, much like I see that, or I see people experiencing that same sort of connection here in Missoula. Someone will be like, hey, my dad went to school with your dad, or hey, like this, that, and
Uh-huh.
the other. And but that's something that I can't relate to here in Missoula.
Okay, and that's just because you don't readily see people that look like you?
Yeah, I do not see people that look like me around. And so I definitely feel very I guess unique in the surrounding that I'm in.
Do you feel like you relate to people just visually walking down the street if they're a person of color?
I think so. I guess in like maybe just based on that, just based
Yeah.
on the fact that I know that in Missoula, looking statistically at the demographics, that if I see another person of color, that we are marginalized communities, that we're small communities of people, and that and so in knowing that, I feel a kind of a connection to someone. I mean, we may not necessarily agree on that notion, but For me personally, I would say that yeah, I don't know if I relate to them, but I would say that I would feel more comfortable approaching them, or I would feel more comfortable in general, just being like, oh, wow, that was another brown person walking past me, or wow, that was,
Okay.
you know what I mean?
Is that because do you feel uncomfortable with white people? Like, I guess, I mean, I know what you mean, but I like don't understand the comparison necessarily.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say that I'm uncomfortable with white people per se. I would just say that um, I guess I feel more comfortable in knowing that I may have something that relates to that person of color,
Okay.
whether that's life experiences, current experiences, or just again the fact that we are both minorities in this community.
Hmm.
Just like very basic things. And when I see a white person, I'm not uncomfortable. It's just more like I'm not sure what I have in common with that person,
Yeah.
you know,
Okay.
and because might not have had an opportunity to have a conversation with that person, um, yeah, I wouldn't know what to relate to them on. It's just kind of like when I see a person of color, I'm like, okay, well, I'm just kind of going through in my mind, what are the different things that we may or may not relate to. When I see a white person pass me, I think, well, we don't have anything to relate to. So, other than where we live. uh,
Hmm.
yeah.
Um, you've been doing a lot of work in diversity. Was that something that you're interested in before you moved away from your community?
I would say it's the opposite. I wasn't interested in diversity and equity work when I first left Maryland. I think that because it was all around me at home, I was not in tune with the issues that people were dealing with within the community. For many reasons, I was young when I left. I was 17 when I left home.
Mm.
So at 17, I just was, you know, fairly comfortable living in the community that I was in, and I knew about a lot of the community issues, but I wasn't necessarily involved. Um, Culturally speaking, just my parents and the Korean community, like really, um, you know, want their young folks to be in school and to focus on the opportunities that are there for that were there for me. My parents always reminded me, like, we didn't come to America for us to have a good life. We came to America so you could have a good life. And like,
Your
um,
parents said that to you?
yeah. And so it's
Yeah.
just like, and taking that to heart, it's like, okay, well then I need to like focus on what I need to do to succeed, um, for whatever that meant. And I think that's changed throughout the years, but yeah.
Okay. But did you move to Missoula right away, or did you live other places first?
Yeah, I got to travel around. I lived in different places, and I was able to experience different cultures, and experience different places. And I think within that, I started to grow an interest in diversity because the spaces that I was in. I started to realize, when I left my community, that's what I did. I left my community. And so, maybe that's part of just growing up, when you realize, like, oh, when you leave home and your community, you're in search of a new community, in search of a new
Hmm.
home, and looking for those things that make you feel comfortable and make you feel wanted and appreciated and just a part of something. And so when I got to Missoula, what sparked my interest in diversity was the lack of it. Not the fact that there was a lot of it. It's just there was a complete lack of it in the spaces that I was working in and having fun in and recreating in and eating in and doing anything in. I didn't see any. I mean, I did. I would say that saying that I didn't see anybody would be out of context. I definitely did see people of color, but I mean, it was so far and few between.
Yeah.
I went to the university, and I'd sometimes be the only person of color in a classroom. And I was like, wow, this is a university. Like, I would think that this would be like a multicultural place, and then I started to realize that that there is diversity at the university, but we're in different programs or whatever,
Yeah. What
that
did you
dynamic
go to school
is.
for?
I went to school for photojournalism and communications.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then at what point after living here did you get involved with Empire, Montana? Or
Yeah.
okay.
hmm So I got involved with Empower Montana in December, or I guess January is when I started. So
Okay.
fairly new to the position, but I've been doing equity work prior to that at a public lands, a hunting and fishing company organization, and then I did like all of my school theses and final projects on the lack of diversity, which I don't think my professors were very fond of because they were all white. And so I think for them it was also a little bit of they just didn't understand, you know.
Okay.
They were like, "Oh, we go skiing with our kids all the time. What do you mean?" And it's like, well, what I mean is that like I don't see people like that on the mountain, and it really does make a difference, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if you see Brad, Chad, and Brian all the time, then of course you're going to be comfortable. But like, if I'm not seeing like people that look like me out there, then my own psyche around the sport and around who it's meant for really changes.
Yeah. Yeah. And then so with Empower Montana, th- so the BIPOC group that you put together, is that Elevate Montana?
Yeah. So
Is
right
that
now,
part of the same thing?
no, it's
Okay.
not. So the outdoor group that I guide and facilitate is currently called Elevate Montana, and there's some meaning behind the name. First, it's that our goal is to elevate one another through the outdoors, and elevate our experiences together in the outdoors, and then also that people of color elevate this state, and that this state
Mm.
has a lot of history, and the foundations of this state are off the backs of people of color, and people of color continue to elevate this state. And so I thought it would, yeah, we kind of all agreed that it would be a good name for an outdoor group that wants to elevate people's experiences outside.
And then
And
what
that is,
is what?
sorry, and I go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. So I was just gonna say that it's not through Empower Montana. It's through Missoula Parks and Rec,
Okay.
and it's a program that I started. Like, I guess it was first with another. It was like a floating group that I had started a year ago, but it got funded by the city when I started at Empower, so around January is when.
Okay. Okay. And then what is attending an event like that like? What is there, do you guys talk about anything specifically, or it's just about being with each other?
Yeah, um, that's a good question because that's something that I've also been kind of thinking through myself. And we do talk about things. We talk about competency in the outdoors, and we try and educate as much as we can. So this past weekend, we went rafting, and just everybody got to get on the oars, and I'm talking about how to read the water, and what to look for, and how to do um, just how to participate in rafting uh,
Uh-huh.
on a basic level. And our goals are really to build competency so that people have confidence to be out there. Because often for marginalized communities, they have to depend on a system or a program or someone to teach them how to do these things. And the idea of independence is like so far away. And I just want to start building that confidence in people that they can be independent, that they can go and do these things. Because, um,
Are you
it's
speaking from a perspective of like immigration or like just in general?
I'm speaking on the perspective of opportunities for work, and also,
Uh-huh.
but not just within the industry, I guess. So I'm speaking from the perspective of industry, and then the general idea of the lack of access that people of color experience in Missoula, Montana, when it comes to the outdoors. Uh,
Yeah.
and uh, the group is is a space for Black, Indigenous people of color, and because it is a space for Black, Indigenous people of color, we don't need to talk about why that space is the space. It
Yeah.
really just becomes it what it is it's really nice. It's just a community. It's like, it's um, I think naturally those conversations happen anyways. Like I
Okay.
don't have to, like, I'm not facilitating any conversations. I think that people talk about that within themselves anyways. I think something really cool that I noticed is that, like, there are people of color that meet through this program that are in different parts of the community and don't interact with one another normally. Like, we have students meeting refugees, and refugees meeting community members, and community members meeting students, and like all these different people that you wouldn't normally approach. Maybe they're all just, in a raft together, or we're mountain biking
Yeah.
together, or we're hiking together, or doing whatever outdoor activity. And um, in that moment of doing that activity, the conversation is normally started by someone saying, wow, this is the first time that I've, like, been around, other people of color doing this type of stuff,
Yeah.
you
I
know?
think like for me, I definitely feel uneasy about approaching other people that I know are people of color
Hmm.
and just being like, "Hey, we're both marginalized." And like I like a part of me wants to, but then there is that uneasiness, and I think that like having these communities really bridges that gap.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think it's a tough thing to, like, figure out. I mean, I'm from the city and people just yell at each other. If you want something from someone, you say, "Hey man, what are you doing?" And you just do it. And I think people here are, well, it's all white people, and so they're just like, they're not, I don't know, it's not the culture here, but I feel like I just do that. I mean, that's like how I've met a lot of people in this town. I'll just be like, "Hey,
Yeah.
like, where do I go do this?" And they're like, "Why are you asking me?" And I'm just like, "Because I felt comfortable asking you," you know, and
Oh, okay.
and it'll just kind of spark a conversation, or I might bring something up, like, I noticed this guy's shoes one day, and I was like, "Those are really nice Jordans," and I, like, knew what they were, and he was like, "Where are you from? Like, why do you know that?" And I was like, "I'm not from Montana," and we just kind of, like, sparked this conversation like that. And I think there are different ways to spark conversations, absolutely, but it is a very hard conversation to have.
Yeah. Did your parents like knowingly move into a Korean community, or was that something that they searched for when they moved here?
Yeah, so um, in the late '80s, and maybe even before that, but that's as far as I know. The Korean communities all around the United States, really any minority community, you can look in any major city. There's like a Chinatown, or Koreatown, or whatever town it might be, like Little Tokyo in LA, or there's all these different minority communities, and I think a little bit of both. I think
Okay.
my parents knew. I think when most immigrant families come, there's some sort of connection to the place that they're going, whether it's someone they know or a community. And so, for my parents, my dad had work out in Maryland, and so he had a small community of people that he knew out here or out in Maryland. And then my parents decided to go out there because, yeah, it was a good community.
Okay. And and you said that you haven't been to Korea yet because of the draft?
Right. Yep. And so Korea is actively in, it's in a standstill right now. And so because I am at an age that can be in the military there, if I were to go to Korea, I would have to serve in their military. Now, the question deems, why do you have to do that if you're an American citizen? That's because when I was born, my parents were not U.S. citizens. I was born to two Korean citizens. It's called the birthright law. It's something that Trump has tried to take away. Um,
Wait, what do you mean takeaway of being an American citizen?
No, Trump has
Or,
tried to take away the ability for parents to come to America and birth a child, and that child be an American citizen.
okay.
So, like, so my parents were like, we don't have any other way to get this kid a better life, so we have to just birth him here, and then
Uh-huh.
he's automatically a U.S. citizen by birthright. And so that's how I gained my US citizenship. But because I was born to two Korean citizens in America, Korea sees me as a Korean citizen because my parents were both Korean at the time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've been trying to apply for dual citizenship for a while, but there's like I think the term is consulate,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
Um there's a consulate that comes to Montana every summer, and for some reason last summer didn't come when I was going to apply for my passport.
Uh-huh.
And then this year COVID.
Mhm.
But I've always felt like because my mom wasn't a citizen when she had us, and like my cousins have been able to apply for their dual citizenship.
Mm.
It's something that I felt like would help with my own identity problems by just, like becoming legally a Filipino citizen.
Is that something that you like when you say it's like for your identity, like is that something that you recognize like early in life or now in life? Like when did that play a part for you?
I think so growing up, until like about high school, or no, actually, I don't really know. So growing up though, for the most part, I always identified as just Filipino. And then when we went to the Philippines and I wasn't a baby, like it was an odd thing to say I'm Filipino in the Philippines when I was clearly like not just Filipino.
Hmm.
And that kind of caused a riff in the way that I saw myself, and like my little sister experienced the same thing. And then when we came back, suddenly we didn't really know like where we fit anymore. And I in college I was really exploring that, and when I was studying abroad and people were asking me where I was from, and actually, every time I've been abroad, when people ask me where I'm from and I say America, that's where they're like, no, where are you from? Like, I
Hmm.
don't really get that as much in the States as I do when I'm traveling abroad. And, um, and like that also just made me feel so much more confused about it. And it wasn't until my thesis year of college that I realized that if I just say I'm Filipino American, with a hyphen, then I won't have to explain anything to anybody. Like no one's gonna question me anymore,
Hmm.
and that gave me a sense of security. And I found out around the same time that like I'm automatically a dual citizen because my mom was not a U.S. citizen when she had us, and that I have the opportunity to have dual citizenship if I want it. And I like felt like that would be just something to help me feel a little more connected to myself. I don't know. Have you had similar experiences?
I have, yeah. Even though I'm full Korean, like I was born to two Korean parents, my cousins in Korea and people that in the community, even in Maryland, some of the folks that immigrated when they were older adults, they would say, "You're not Korean, you're Korean American," or they'd just say, "You're an American kid," you know,
Uh-huh.
and so I think, yeah, I definitely can relate to you in that. Yeah, in that kind of dilemma with identities and not knowing which one you like fit into, but you are both, and or you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's still definitely. I don't know that it has any effects on me, but I definitely feel like when I think about who I am, um, those types of questions definitely are things that I ponder because
Yeah.
because my relationship to Korea, the country, it's not there. I haven't been there, and I don't. But I'm fluent in Korean. My first language is Korean. I learned English through public schools. Like I grew up in a in a I guess in an Americanized Korean home, uh,
Yeah.
but as like traditional as I could imagine it to be, and so yeah, I definitely feel like yeah, I think something like yeah, like dual citizenship or at least understanding where I'm from would definitely help me to understand my yeah, who I am better, because I feel like those complexities made my upbringing a little bit harder on my parents, because I, would go to school and speak English, and I would be like who I needed to be at school, and then I'd come home and be a completely different kid because I just needed to be a different person, and I was always like these two or three different people,
Yeah.
and I still feel that way sometimes.
Have you found a Korean community in Missoula at all?
No,
Like,
I've
not at all?
not at all. I think I've only met like one other Korean person, and they were studying they're studying at the university as an international student. I don't know if they're still here or not.
Oh, okay. That must feel kind of lonely.
Yeah, I feel like yeah, I mean, you know, I can't I mean, I would say that I have this outdoor group, and that the effort is out there, like I'm putting out the effort to like reach out to different people.
Mm.
Um but I wouldn't say that yeah, I mean, I guess yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's definitely lonely to an extent, for sure.
How do
Absolutely.
you feel about how do you feel about BIPOC and being included in a dialogue with Black and Indigenous people?
Yeah. I feel I don't know if I feel empathy, and I feel um I feel yeah, I think I don't know. I don't really know how to feel sometimes, to be honest. It's a really tough conversation in general, because I don't know,
Mhm.
I will not know what indigenous people endure and continue to endure, or what black people endure and continue to endure. But Asian people also have, struggled in this country, and Montana history, there were a lot of Asian people here working in the mines, building the railroads. Um, people were, Japanese people were imprisoned in Missoula, Montana. And so Missoula and Montana has, they have a culture, or not a culture, but a history of Asian people. Um, but to be included in the conversation of Black and Indigenous people, I feel like how I am included is more so it related to how I feel, um,
Okay.
and how I'm involved. And I am involved in equity and diversity work and advocacy work. And so um, I support those communities in the best ways that I can. And I feel for, um, you know, what they're going through, but I can't really understand what that is or what that's like. And so, yeah, and it's like I don't know if you've heard this for Asian communities, but it's like the silent group. It's like Asian people are like over here, and
Yeah, that's how I've always felt like of I'm aware of like the history of marginalization with Asian people, but at the same time I feel like we're one of the first minorities to be accepted at any kind of level. And so it has like in the beginning of BIPOC, I felt really uncomfortable with being included in the conversation.
mm,
And like the more I have these conversations with people of color, the more I realize that what like bonds us is just like this identity thing of like, like trying to like having a history of trying to assimilate and and I think to me BIPOC has been healing in a way that I didn't know that I needed to heal. And it's like made me realize that actually I have been experiencing racism, not like quite as overtly as Indigenous and and Black people, and even like there are like some instances that are worse than others, but nowhere near. And but like growing up, I've always just brushed that off as like giving people the benefit of the doubt. And as I've gotten older, I've realized, and like the more I have these conversations, the more I realize that that's systemic racism, and or systemized racism. And what do you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, April. I growing up, I definitely experienced, you know, just being stereotyped or having the biases against me. I guess in my life trajectory in general, like I've always kind of like been outside of the box. And I realized when I moved to Montana why my parents wanted me to stay within the community. Because with the
Okay.
community, if you weren't different, then you were supported. Like the community would support you, and you would have all these people, out there, kind of ready to be at bat for you, and just be there for you. And when I left that community, um, and I started to do things that were outside of the scope of my community, I realized that I don't have that support, and I really was just like off on my own to do these things. And when I would experience these notions of racism, I just thought, okay, well, maybe this is just because like I'm different. I'm obviously different. And so like people just have a hard time understanding what it is. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and same like, in relation to your experience, yeah, just the older I got and the more experiences that I had, I realized that it was just people being blatantly racist. Um, and I thought that it was, um, yeah, I mean, it's sad, it's like, I think, yeah, it's like in a weird way, I now that I'm older, I can definitely understand why my parents kind of wanted me to like stay on this course that they had envisioned, for
Yeah.
me. And I can't imagine what they had to go through, to understand that it's safe in one way, and they wanted me to be safe. And I just like decided to go like far left and like just like run off and do my own thing. And um yeah, and I think that that had some consequences for myself as well. And so yeah, I feel like, and a good thing that I've always heard is, pain is pain. And it's, you don't always have to compare how much pain someone goes through to be able to relate to them. It's just
Yeah.
understanding that that sort of pain is experienced, and being able to empathize with that, um, to the best that you can. And I agree, it's definitely been very healing for me, especially because I grew up in a very tight knit community, to
Mm-hmm.
not have that community, and then to now kind of like start to slowly like build that community, uh,
Yeah.
especially in a field that I enjoy, like in recreation. It's really changed my perspective on the outdoors, and very much so like changed my whole like, yeah, just the whole thing around the outdoors. And like what you're doing, like bringing together artists that are of color. Like I also do art, like I do photography. Photography is my medium, but I've been doing that for a while. And knowing that, like, I knew that there were obviously like creative people, like all my favorite artists are like Asian people, but I'm just saying, like in Montana, I was like, I don't know, I don't really see like who these creative folks are. And
Yeah.
just, I think that there is a value to that. And it, whether it's, um, like coincidence or not coincidence, like being able to bring people together, I think it just, yeah, just sparks a conversation around that, because you realize that you're in a place that you haven't been able to have that conversation. And so everyone just kind of like jumps on the opportunity to do it.
Yeah. I think I'm really interested to see how like the BIPOC community and all these, like with these groups really evolves, because I think I've been thinking a lot about it for the last few years of like Like I feel like I left my community, even though it's only in Helena, and I haven't really like I've been terrified to I know that there's a similar community that like once a year at least they all get together, like all the major cities here in Montana, and do a giant Filipino American party. So I know that there is a really tight knit community existing here, but I've been terrified to reach out to it because I feel like even in the community in Helena, I think I got to a certain age and I didn't feel like I belonged in it anymore. And I think that a lot of like us kids felt the same way.
Mm,
And because like we all grew up together, our parents, like all teamed up to raise us kids. But like as we get older, there is like somehow it's made it harder to relate to our parents, even like as minorities. And I think that that's what I'm really excited about BIPOC for, is that I feel like you and I have more in common, than like I don't know, maybe it's generational too. Like, what do you think?
yeah, I agree. I think it's all of it. It's everything that you said. I have a hard time relating to my parents. Absolutely. I mean, I think me leaving at 17 and being 28 now, and they're almost being over almost a decade, of me just leaving, just doing my own thing and not going home. And so I think
You haven't been back in a decade?
I've been back and forth here and there, but
Okay.
I haven't. The last time I was home was almost a year and a half ago,
Wow.
2 years ago, and so um, yeah, so I definitely feel very separated from my immediate family and the culture that I was raised in, and I do think that a part of it is the generational gap. Um, being a first generation Korean for myself, I was the first one to graduate college in my family. Like I was the first person, like I was doing my parents' bills when I was like 13 or 14 years old. Like doing like my dad's like visa stuff when he was doing like going through like immigration, or like I would fill out my school entry forms and like my mom would just sign it and like
Same. Oh, well, and she taught us to forge your signature.
yeah, exactly, like all that type of stuff. And so um and then like now that we're adults, like we kind of have it like sort of figured out in like society in 2020. Like I can get around, I know what I'm doing, and I think my parents still see me as their kid. And so our idea of society and what society is definitely differs, and it's hard to relate to because our struggles are different. And
Yeah.
just I want to relate to their struggles, like I can't, because I
Yeah.
and in the same way, it's like yeah, it's like how do I relate to these people that I love dearly and I want to connect with, but I can't because our lives are so different. Like and I think that that's something that I would say that I have very much noticed in Montana is like grandpas can talk to dads and dads can talk to sons or daughters and be like, I went to the U and I remember that building. And do you remember that? Or, that part of the river is that. And I don't have like any of that.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying to take pity on me or anything like that. I'm just saying that I think for a lot of first generation kids, there isn't that like time because the places were different. My parents grew up in Korea; they didn't grow up in America, and
Yeah.
so the things that we relate to are just not there. And that history of you know being in a spot or being in a place isn't there either, and the roots aren't there, and so yeah, I think it's very difficult to connect.
Well, what is your relationship with your parents like? Like, as you get older, do you feel like you have more of an appreciation of what they went through? Or is it just getting harder to relate to them?
I think that when I was younger, because my parents always like pushed me in a direction. I carried around a lot of bitterness towards them because I always had two conflicting identities, like what we were just talking about. Like I had
Yeah.
to be someone at home and then I had to be someone like at school, and then I came to a point in my life where I was like, I have to choose like one or the other, or I felt like I had to choose one or the other. Um, and so that made our relationship pretty hard because I decided to leave. I decided to leave that community. Um, but now I would say um, that, yeah, I've realized a lot. I've realized my own selfishness in that action and the repercussions of that. I've realized um, just everything that my parents had to go through, to like buy a home or to buy a car or to do these small things, or not small things, or huge things. But, it's, I guess I'm getting to that age where I'm interested in looking into those types of things as well and realizing, okay, it's really pretty stinking hard for me to figure it out right now. I could not imagine having to figure that out,
Yeah.
30 years ago, not speaking a lick of English. Like, I don't even know how they pulled that off.
Yeah, I think about that, like, I remember when I turned 19 and I was like, "Oh my god, this is the age my mom was when she had an arranged marriage with my dad."
Wow.
And then, like, when I turned 24, I was like, "This is the age my mom was when she had me,"
Mm,
like, her first kid. And then, um and then I guess when I turned 30 is, like, going through a divorce and scrambling to get my citizenship,
mm,
like that's where she would have been. And like um she never got her citizenship. I don't know what the reason was, but it wasn't until they got divorced that she felt like she needed to, because she was terrified that my dad would get us.
mm.
And yeah, and that she'd like get kicked out of the country. But it's just like crazy to think, like, how in the world did she do all this, and I have to like show her how to like turn the TV on. Like, like, obviously not like, some things seem that simple that she asks help with, but
Yeah. And just seeing like how much they have to go through like on a daily basis to like get around in general.
yeah.
Like I remember like watching my mom. I had left for a couple of years and I came back home and we like went out to eat and I was like, they were having a hard time and I was like, whoa, like, yeah, I guess just like
They were
the
having a hard time, like, with what?
just like trying to figure out how to like get us, because they didn't speak English, and so it was like,
Yeah.
what's going on here? Like, in the servers coming up and saying all this stuff to them, and they don't know what they had no idea what the server was saying to them. They're just like nodding, like, yeah, okay, and the
Uh-huh.
server's like asking them all these questions, and they're just like, oh yeah, okay, and I was like, man, it's yeah, I mean, just the privilege and the just the opportunities that I have to know all, like what's going on definitely um, shapes how I perceive my parents now. I think so. It's definitely changed because yeah, I just realized like I took all of this for granted and like, and I didn't
Yeah.
consider any of that when I was a kid. And now I do, and I try my best to help. And it's still like, yeah, I feel like it's like an ongoing for the rest of my life. It'll be something that I am working on.
Do you feel like, are your parents proud of what you're doing now?
I would say at first they weren't, because yeah, I think so deeply they believed in like the struggle that they had for me to live a specific life that they envisioned for me, and for me to just like do the 180 and like kind of do my own thing. It was really hard for them, and so and also in Korea and in my culture, the idea of being proud of something is just like I've never heard my parents say that, ever. And so, no, I don't know. I have no idea. I think
Do
that
your
they,
parents say they love you?
that's also something we're working on.
Okay.
I think for them, yeah, it's just culture,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, my mom like rarely says it. We initiate it.
like, yeah. And I think that different cultures have different love languages. Different individuals have different love languages, and for my mom, it's like, I might come home and she might not say anything to me, but she'll cook me like, like my favorite,
Oh,
and it's like, okay,
that's love.
yeah.
Yeah. That she's like making you food.
Yeah, or like my dad and I don't really speak very often, but when I come home, he might be like, "Come do this with me," and I'm like, "Dude, I just come home and like do all this work for you," and I'm like, "No, that's because like that's how we spend time together," and so it's just like recognizing those things, and as a young person trying to struggle with my identities, I kept closing off one end so that I could figure out another end. I
Okay.
wasn't working simultaneously around that, and I
Is
regret.
that something that you've been doing recently or have realized recently?
Yeah, very much so. Definitely. I think for me, it was like I recognized like what I needed to do to succeed in the lane that I was going in. And then once I got to a point where I was like, okay, I know the game I need to play, I realized that, oh, I had like left behind like who I am, and
Mhm.
I need to like catch that back up and be able to like do both simultaneously.
So
But
how do you catch up your Koreanness?
right. For me, it's like just being more in touch with my family. Um, still fluent in Korean, so I'll like watch Netflix shows. I'll like watch Korean movies and stuff, and like just talk to friends that I have back at home. Um, Read more about the Korean experience in America, but also like the Korean history. Just things that kind of connect me deeper to like my understanding of self. Um,
Mm,
but yeah, I mean, it's difficult, right? It's difficult when you don't have those people around you in a physical sense. Like I don't have a
yeah.
physical community of Korean people to like reflect on those thoughts with, or to like um, to play out my perceptions and biases and stereotypes. Like I just don't have that, and so maybe I'm doing it all wrong. I have no idea, but
I don't
uh,
think I don't think that's possible. But
yeah,
I ask because I feel like I'm also trying to catch up my Filipino-ness because I felt like I kind of ditched it in high school, you know?
yeah,
And like my mom was a little less involved and like there was just like a weird incident that happened in my family and it kind of separated the Filipino community that was already pretty small and so like we grew up with like a couple really close knit Filipinos that helped raise us and but I always just kind of like compared myself to everyone else's kids and I was like are we getting the same like intensity of cultural upbringing as they are and like sometimes I wish that I had more but
mm,
now that I'm older and I'm looking back I think it was still about the same and and like I don't know I've been trying to learn Tagalog which is actually not what my family speaks but but like already it's been really hard to find like free resources trying to learn Tagalog and my family speaks Bisaya um so I don't know like that language and like of my mom's part of the family is just going to disappear and
mm,
like I'm pretty sure that language doesn't work like I'm pretty sure that you don't lose languages even if you like have a stroke, but it was always a fear of mine that my mom was going to get old and I wouldn't be able to communicate with her anymore.
mm. Do you feel like you practice, or not practice, but try and gain that connection again through your art at all?
So there was a time like my I think I was trying to explore it more overtly in college. And then when I would talk about it in critique, I would kind of feel like I felt like people weren't really receiving it very well. Like
Mm,
I was getting a lot of like kind of rolled eyes, kind of like not literally, but that's how it felt like people were reacting to my work. And so I stopped trying to reference it um so overtly. And I like for a while I was trying to find things that weren't my own body to use as references. Because I was doing a show based on being biracial, and
okay.
so like my skin was like the first and foremost thing that I could reference. And so then I did a series with the spam can
What is that?
because
Oh, the spam can. Nice.
yeah, yeah, because like Filipinos fucking love spam. And it's just this like arbitrary thing that Americans left behind in the Philippines that just became such a big part of the culture. And I just felt like that represented me pretty well, like Filipino American.
Mm,
And and then I moved on because I've been always been just really attracted to anatomy in some way. So I moved on and I started using hands, and
okay.
and that still like that represents my experience. Like they're all drawn from my experience. And they're just like little narrations of just like coming of age themes. But what I love about hands is that they're genderless.
Mm,
And then I always paint them in monotones or black and white. And so there's no race associated to them either. So they're just very universal. That's kind of been. What about you? Do you feel like you explore your identity in any art forms?
yeah. Same. Or not same, but I feel like I struggled with it, or continue to. Especially with photography, I um, have been really thinking about how I learned photography and how I learned to like frame a photo, and and I know that there are like fundamentals to photography, like I learned that in school and I understand that, but everybody that I've learned from has been a white man, and so I realize that I see the camera through the lens of a white person, and
Wow.
they want things to be portrayed. You know what I mean? Like
Uh-huh.
everything that I learned was like what Professor so and so perceives what good photography should or shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And so I've been diving into that and kind of like trying to find resources on like just like more photography from Korea or from Asia, and just like looking at the differences of like how things are framed, like how like what is defined as beautiful and what's not, or what's like I shoot a lot of action photography, and it's like although that wasn't a huge thing in either culture, or I mean, I guess it was, but yeah, just like how it's depicted and like what is the main focus point and what's not.
Yeah.
And so I would say I'm learning and kind of diving into that at the moment. In ceramics, I took a couple semesters of ceramics, and Koreans are one of like, it's an ancient culture. It's really, really ancient. And so some of the ceramics have been around for like 1,000+ years. And so just like learning about like the different color varieties and how, and like there's always like and like the different designs. And I got to practice that and like see what that was like and the different purposes that it posed. And that was a really cool way to explore my culture through art, the art of ceramics. And I would say right now, currently, I'm more in like the discovering mode and kind of like
Okay.
the not the dismantling of like what I know as photography now, but just breaking it down, like really like questioning like if I'm inspired by something that's a work of art or a certain way that a snowboarder or someone on a raft is posed, like who's taking that photo, and like is it, and if I'm taking a similar photo, am I just like seeing that same thing in the lens of the way of this person? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, that's so interesting. I haven't ever thought of that before. Like, I think like you're really on to something.
yeah, I don't know what I'm onto, but I definitely know that in photography, at least, it plays a huge role of like how you were taught and who taught you to do it, you know, because
Yeah.
it really is like your professor is like, well, if you put this person in a third while this is happening, you know, in the foreground or background, then this is what I consider to be a great photo. But
Yeah.
that's what that person thinks, you know, and just to question that and to see, you know, its validity in the work that I do, but also like, um, you know, trying to see if there's different perspectives and different ways that I can view things, and maybe it can help me to connect more to my culture
Mhm.
and connect me to something that am looking for more connection to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool. Okay, Alex, I just have one last question for you.
Sure.
And that is, what would you like to see from white allies to make Missoula a more inclusive environment for you?
That is a great question. You know, I think that just more people of color that are in positions, just in any position, you know, like
Mhm.
I think that if you walk around, you know, I've just heard like so many things like we just don't have the demographics or we just don't have this and that. And it's like, no, you do. And it's here. You know, I just think that like you're more comfortable hiring a white person who you can just like immediately relate to. Whereas like if you hire someone that has a cultural difference that you need to like change the room for, that makes it difficult. So I guess my ask for people that want to be allies is really just like if you're in a power of if you're in a position of power, to leverage that so that people of color can have positions, because I think that's really in a community where different people of color can feel inspired and feel empowered to go and do things, you know, like
Yeah.
if I went to a clay studio and I saw, you know, an Asian person there that ran the studio or helped work in the studio, I would feel more comfortable being there because I'd be like, oh, that's really cool that this community, you know, is giving someone the opportunity to be here and to have this position and to really be able to support them, because I think at the end of the day, we live in America, we live in a capitalist society. Money is our language of love. And so if in Missoula, if we are not paying people of color, then we are not showing them that love. Love is
Yeah.
not love is not free labor by people of color. Love is paid labor, you know.
Mhm.
I think that would be the best way. And I know that that's something that this community is really challenged by, because that means that other people have to step down or new positions have to be made or this, that, and the other. But, um, you know, I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, I think you said it really well. I think that's something that I've just been preaching, not in terms of specifically BIPOC, but just on this podcast and I have been in the works on, is just been like artists leave Missoula all the time that reach a level of success and feel capped here because the community doesn't know how to keep them. And I feel like that translates really well to people of color, just like if we pay artists, they'll stay, they'll flourish. Like, and like you're saying, that is the language of love here that we need to see more, is by giving opportunities, making opportunities specifically for BIPOC people. But
Yeah.
you want to say anything before we end the call?
No, I think that's it. Thank you so much for having a
Yeah,
conversation with me, April. I appreciate it.
thanks. You too. I have been loving these, and it's always really nice too to talk to somebody that I know a little bit. It's like I think that the conversations definitely get there, but then it's also just nice to like get to know the people that I know already a little bit more.
Yeah, and come out to one of the outdoor events.
Oh, I will. I was talking to Molly. Do you know
Uh-huh.
Molly?
Yeah,
Yeah, she was saying that she's super excited to go and she hasn't been yet. And like I think that will be coming around the same time.
yeah,
I have them scheduled in my September calendar.
great.
So,
Yeah, well,
all
awesome.
right. Okay, we'll have to get together soon though, regardless.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you again, April. We'll see you
Yeah.
soon.
Bye, Alex.